Commander Park Jimin sat in his small metal chair, staring at the glowing screen in front of him. His job was simple: listen for signals from space and report anything unusual. But today, something very strange had caught his attention. The signal came from a distant planet, far away in what they called the Sol system. It was the third planet from its sun, colored blue and green like a marble. The message itself was basic, just a simple call, asking for contact. Nothing fancy about it. But when Jimin looked at the data about the planet itself, his hands started shaking. He pressed a button on his desk. "Admiral Lee Hyen, please come here right now. You really need to see this." Lee Hyen walked over quickly. She had been doing this job for many years and had seen all kinds of planets. Her gray hair was tied back neatly, and her uniform was perfectly clean. She looked at the screen, and her face went pale. The numbers made no sense. This planet had gravity that was stronger than normal, so strong it would make most aliens feel like they were carrying heavy rocks on their backs all day. The air pressure kept changing in ways that would make other species feel like their heads were going to explode. The weather was crazy violent, with storms so powerful they could destroy entire cities in minutes. "Look at this earthquake data," Lee Hyen said, pointing at red lines jumping up and down on the screen. "The ground shakes so much that most buildings should fall down every few months." But that wasn't even the worst part. The planet had massive storms that threw ice chunks the size of cars from the sky. The temperature could go from freezing cold to burning hot in just a few hours. There were areas where poisonous gases came up from the ground. Some parts of the planet were covered in water so deep that the pressure at the bottom could crush a spaceship. "This is a Class 12 death world," Lee Hyen whispered. "Nothing should be able to live there, let alone build things." Yet the energy readings were clear as day. Not only was there intelligent life on this terrible planet, but they had built machines, cities, and technology. The energy signatures showed factories running, vehicles moving, and communication systems working. These creatures had not just survived on this nightmare world, they had actually done well. Jimin pulled up more data. "Look at this, Admiral. They have metal structures reaching high into the sky. They have vehicles that move faster than our best ships. They even have things flying through their poisonous air." Lee Hyen rubbed her forehead. In all her years of space exploration, she had never seen anything like this. Most species could barely survive on normal, peaceful planets. But these beings had taken a world that should have killed them and turned it into their home. How is this possible? She asked herself out loud. Every single thing about this planet should make life impossible. The gravity alone would break the bones of most species we know. She thought about her own home planet, where the weather was always nice, where the ground never shook, where the air was always clean and easy to breathe. Even there, her people sometimes struggled with simple problems. But these mysterious beings had faced dangers every single day and somehow gotten stronger because of it. "Prepare a rescue team," Lee Hyen finally said. "Get our best protective suits, medical equipment, and emergency shelters. These poor creatures must be desperate for help. We need to get them off that terrible planet as fast as possible." The team started gathering their equipment, thinking they were going to save a struggling, weak civilization that had barely managed to survive on their harsh world. They packed medicine, food, and comfortable clothes. They planned to take these suffering beings to nice, safe planets where they could live in peace. What they didn't know was that the humans living on that dangerous planet weren't suffering at all. They weren't weak or desperate. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that had been made stronger by constant danger, and they had no plans to leave their home or be rescued by anyone. Ambassador Kim Do-yeon felt nervous as her small ship landed on the strange planet's surface. She was wearing the best protective suit her people had ever made: thick metal plating, air filters, temperature controls, and radiation shields. The suit was so heavy, she could barely walk, but it was the only way to survive on this deadly world. She expected to find scared, weak people hiding in underground caves or broken shelters. Maybe they would be thin from hunger or sick from breathing the poisonous air. She had brought medical supplies and emergency food, thinking these poor beings would cry with happiness when they saw help had finally arrived. But when the door of her ship opened, she saw something that made no sense at all. A man walked up to her wearing nothing but a simple dark suit, the kind people might wear to an office meeting. No protective gear, no breathing mask, no thick boots. He was just walking around in the open air like it was the most normal thing in the world. His hair was neat, his clothes were clean, and he had a big friendly smile on his face. "Welcome to Earth," he said in a clear, strong voice. "My name is President Choi Min-ho. Thank you so much for coming here so quickly after we sent our message." Kim Do-yeon's translation device started making weird noises, like it couldn't understand what was happening. This man was breathing air that should have burned his lungs. He was standing in gravity that should have crushed his bones. The ground under his feet was shaking slightly from small earthquakes, but he didn't even seem to notice. "Please, come with me," Choi Min-ho said, gesturing toward a large city in the distance. "I'd love to show you around our home." As they walked, Kim Do-yeon couldn't believe what she was seeing. Huge buildings made of glass and metal reached up toward the clouds, taller than anything on her own planet. Vehicles moved smoothly along wide roads, carrying thousands of people from place to place. Flying machines zoomed through the air above them, somehow managing to stay up even in the crazy wind patterns. People were everywhere, walking on the streets, sitting outside eating food, children playing in parks. They all looked healthy and happy. Some were even exercising, running and jumping around like the heavy gravity was nothing to them. Nobody was wearing protective gear. They were all just living their normal lives on a planet that should have killed them instantly. "This is downtown, Seoul Choi," Min-ho explained as they walked past a massive fountain surrounded by colorful flowers. "It's one of our bigger cities. We have many others like it all around the world." Kim Do-yeon's head was spinning. Through her thick helmet, she watched people casually doing things that would be impossible on any other planet. A group of workers were building something new, lifting heavy metal beams like they weighed nothing. Street vendors were selling hot food that smelled amazing, even through her air filters. "I don't understand," she finally said, her voice shaking. "How are you all alive? Our computers say this planet should be completely uninhabitable." Choi Min-ho looked confused. "Uninhabitable? This is our home. We've lived here for thousands of years. Sure, we get some rough weather sometimes, and the ground shakes a bit, but that's just normal life." Kim Do-yeon tried to remember her training. She was supposed to help desperate survivors, not have a casual conversation with people who seemed perfectly fine. "We've prepared safe places for your people to live," she said carefully. "The Galactic Council has many peaceful planets where you could have better lives. Places with gentle weather, stable ground, and clean air. We can take you away from all this danger." Choi Min-ho stopped walking and looked at her with genuine surprise. "Refugees? Oh, I think you've misunderstood our message completely." He smiled again, but this time Kim Do-yeon noticed something different about it. There was a strength behind his eyes, like someone who had faced terrible challenges and won. "We didn't call for help because we needed to be rescued," he continued. "We sent that signal because our scientists detected some very strange energy readings coming from deep space. We were worried that someone else might be in trouble. We wanted to know if you needed our help." The words hit Kim Do-yeon like a physical blow. These people, living on a world that would kill her in minutes without her protective suit, were offering to help the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Song Woo-jin sat perfectly still in the large meeting room, his hands folded on the table in front of him. Around him, alien generals and commanders from dozens of different worlds looked like they hadn't slept in months. Their shoulders were slumped, their voices were quiet, and some were even shaking slightly. These were supposed to be the greatest military minds in the galaxy, but they looked like defeated soldiers. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a three-dimensional map of space, with red dots marking destroyed planets and flashing warning signs everywhere. It looked like a disease spreading across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. General Vexera, a tall blue creature with 4 arms, stood up slowly. His voice was tired and full of despair. Admiral Song, what we're about to show you is classified at the highest level. The threat we face is unlike anything we've ever encountered. The display changed to show massive black ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities. They moved through space like hungry animals, surrounding planets, and slowly draining away all the light and energy until nothing was left but empty, dead rocks floating in darkness. We call them the Void Swarm, General Vexera continued, his 4 arms moving helplessly through the air. They appeared at the edge of our galaxy 5 years ago. Since then, they've completely destroyed 67 entire worlds. Not just the people living there, the planets themselves are left as lifeless chunks of rock. Song Wujin leaned forward slightly, studying the images with the calm focus of someone who had spent his whole life dealing with dangerous situations. On Earth, people faced deadly storms, earthquakes, and wild animals every day. This was just a bigger version of the same problem. How fast do they move? He asked in a steady voice. They can cross entire star systems in days, Admiral Kativan replied, his green skin looking pale with fear. Our fastest ships take weeks to cover the same distance. And their weapons? General Vexera pulled up more data. This is what worries us most. Their technology is far beyond anything we understand. When we shoot at their ships, the damage just heals itself within minutes. Our strongest weapons bounce off their shields like throwing rocks at a mountain, and somehow, they learn from every battle. If we use a strategy that works once, it never works again. Song Wujin made some notes on his small tablet, his expression never changing. What about their numbers? We estimate at least 3,000 ships in their main fleet, plus smaller groups scattered across the galaxy. Every time we think we've hurt them, more ships appear from nowhere. The room fell quiet as everyone watched Song Wujin continue writing notes. The other military leaders looked at him with confusion. They had just described an enemy that was destroying their entire civilization, and this human was treating it like a routine planning meeting. Our combined fleets have tried everything, General Vexera said desperately. Coordinated attacks, defensive positions, even running away and trying to hide. Nothing works. We lose more ships and planets every month. Song Wujin looked up from his tablet. What's their goal? Do they want territory, resources, or something else? That's just it. We don't know. They don't try to communicate. They don't take prisoners. They don't even seem interested in the valuable materials on the planets they destroy. They just consume everything and move on to the next target. Interesting, Song Wujin said quietly, making another note. We'd like to help. The entire room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The alien generals looked at each other with wide eyes, like they couldn't believe what they had just heard. Finally, Admiral Kativan spoke up, trying to be polite, but clearly thinking Song Wujin didn't understand the situation. With all due respect, Commander Song, your people are new to space travel. This enemy has defeated civilizations that have been building warships for thousands of years. Your planet doesn't have the industrial capacity to build the kind of fleet we would need. Song Wujin looked directly at Admiral Kativan with calm, steady eyes. It's Admiral Song, actually. And you're right that we'll need time to prepare. Give us 3 months, and we'll have a fleet ready to help. The council members started whispering to each other in their various languages. Some were shaking their heads. Others were making gestures that clearly meant they thought the human had lost his mind. What they didn't understand was that Song Wujin came from a world where survival meant adapting to impossible situations every single day. To him, the Void Swarm wasn't an unstoppable force. It was just another predator that needed to be dealt with. Chief Engineer Nam Taiyang floated through the massive space station orbiting Earth, using small jets on his suit to move between different sections of the shipyard. All around him, thousands of workers were busy transforming ordinary Earth ships into something completely new. What had been simple cargo haulers and exploration vessels just weeks ago were now becoming weapons of war. He stopped at a viewing window and watched welders cutting through the hull of a large transport ship. Sparks flew in all directions as they removed entire sections that had once held comfortable passenger cabins and recreational areas. "Come look at this," he called to his assistant, Engineer Park Soo-yang, who was reviewing blueprints on her tablet. "Do you see what's wrong with these alien ship designs?" Park Soo-yang floated over and looked at the council ship specifications displayed on a nearby screen. "They seem very advanced to me." Nam Taiyang pointed at different sections of the blueprint. "Advanced, yes, but look at how much space they waste. Here's a room just for relaxation. Here's a backup system for the backup system. And look at this. They have safety margins built into everything that make the ships 30% less efficient than they could be." He pulled up the layout of a typical council warship on his tablet. "These alien crews need perfect temperature control, comfortable sleeping areas, entertainment systems, and multiple backup life support systems. Their ships are basically flying hotels that happen to have some weapons attached." Park Soo-yang started to understand. "But our people are different." "Exactly," Nam Taiyang said with a grin. "Our workers have been building things in conditions that would kill most aliens since the day they were born. We don't need perfect comfort, we need maximum effectiveness." They moved to another section where engineers were installing new weapon systems, instead of the careful, safe installations the council used. The human engineers were connecting the weapons directly to the ship's main power supply. "This design will let us fire weapons at triple the normal power level," explained lead technician Kim Hyun-woo, who was covered in grease and metal shavings. "The downside is that it draws power away from life support, artificial gravity, and heating systems." "Will the crew be able to handle that?" Park Soo-yang asked. Kim Hyun-woo laughed. "Are you kidding? These are people who grew up dealing with power outages during ice storms and heat waves. A little cold air and reduced gravity won't even slow them down." In another section, workers were installing something that looked completely insane to anyone familiar with normal spaceship design. They were building small pods that could be shot out of the main ship like bullets, carrying human soldiers directly into enemy vessels. The council observers nearly fainted when they saw these boarding pods, Nam Taiyang explained. They said, "It was suicide to send people flying through space in such small, unprotected containers." "And what did you tell them?" "I reminded them that humans regularly throw themselves out of aircraft on Earth for fun, using nothing but a piece of cloth to slow their fall. Going from one spaceship to another isn't that different?" The most radical change was in the ship's armor design. Instead of building thick, permanent armor like other species used, the human engineers had created modular plating that could be ejected in sections. "If we need extra speed during a battle, we can literally throw away parts of our ship," Nam Taiyang explained. "The council thinks this makes the ships more vulnerable, doesn't it?" Park Soo-yang asked. "Only if you're afraid of getting hurt, but our crews have been living with danger their entire lives. They'd rather have a fast, maneuverable ship that can avoid getting hit than a slow, heavily armored one that makes an easy target." Throughout the shipyard, similar modifications were taking place. Environmental systems were being simplified to the bare minimum. Navigation systems were designed to work even when damaged. Weapons were built to keep firing even if the ship was falling apart around them. The alien observers keep filing reports saying we're building death traps. Park Soo-yang commented as they watched a test firing of the new weapon systems. Nam Taeyang's smile turned cold and determined. They're absolutely right. We are building death traps. But here's what they don't understand. These death traps aren't meant to kill us. They're meant to kill our enemies. By the end of the month, Earth's fleet looked nothing like the comfortable evacuation ships the Galactic Council expected. They were lean, dangerous, and built by people who understood that survival sometimes meant accepting risks that would terrify anyone from a safer world. Captain Lee Ji-ho stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the last groups of people walk up the boarding ramp. To anyone watching from outside, it looked like a typical evacuation. Families carrying suitcases, elderly people moving slowly with walking sticks, children holding their parents' hands, and scientists carrying boxes of research equipment. The council observers stationed nearby were checking names off their lists, making sure everyone was accounted for. They seemed satisfied that Earth's people were finally accepting help and leaving their dangerous planet for safer worlds in council space. But Lee Ji-ho knew the truth, and it made him smile quietly to himself. The family walking past him right now consisted of Lieutenant Colonel Park Min-seo, Master Sergeant Choi Yuna, and their children, who were actually junior intelligence officers, trained in deep space reconnaissance. The old man with the walking stick was Colonel Kim Da-hoon, who had spent 30 years teaching close combat, fighting two Earth's most elite soldiers. Captain, said Communications Officer Kim Sayajin, who was sitting at her station wearing civilian clothes that hid her military rank. The Council Control Center is giving us permission to leave. Thank you, Lieutenant, Lee Ji-ho replied quietly, settling into his command chair. Around the ship, people were finding their seats and securing their belongings. But these weren't scared refugees, grateful for rescue. These were some of Earth's most experienced warriors, each one personally selected for this mission. The scientists were weapons specialists. The engineers were demolitions experts. The medical staff were combat medics who could perform surgery while under enemy fire. Even the youngest-looking passengers were actually adult officers who had been chosen partly because they appeared harmless to alien eyes. Earth's military had learned long ago that looking innocent could be just as useful as looking dangerous. All passengers are secure, Captain, reported ship's coordinator Nam Ji-won, who was officially listed as a civilian transportation manager, but actually held the rank of major in Earth's special forces. Lee Ji-ho activated his communication system to contact the other ships in their fleet. All vessels, this is Admiral Park Jin-woo, aboard the flagship Retribution. Prepare for departure. From the outside, the 47 ships looked like a standard refugee convoy. They had been painted to look old and peaceful, with external markings that suggested they were carrying families and supplies to safety. The Council's sensors showed cargo holds full of personal belongings, life support systems calibrated for non-military passengers, and energy signatures consistent with civilian vessels. What the sensors couldn't detect were the hidden weapon systems built into the ship's structure. The military-grade communication arrays disguised as navigation equipment, and the fact that every personal belonging in the cargo hold was actually military hardware designed for space combat. All ships report ready for hyperspace jump, Kim Seo-jin announced. Excellent. Admiral Park Jin-woo's voice came through the communication system. Today, we begin Earth's first military operation beyond our solar system. It's time to show the galaxy what humans can do when we stop pretending to be harmless. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, the Council observers filed their routine reports. Human evacuation proceeding smoothly, they wrote. Refugee fleet departing for Council space with full passenger capacity. No military activity detected. They had no idea they had just watched the deployment of the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. These weren't refugees running away from danger. They were predators heading toward it. The 12,000 humans aboard those 47 ships represented the best of Earth's military capabilities. They were people who had grown up breathing poisonous air, surviving in crushing gravity, and dealing with natural disasters that would wipe out entire alien civilizations. They had been trained by a world that tried to kill them every single day, and they had not just survived, but thrived as the ships disappeared into hyperspace. Heading toward the Kepler sector where the Void Swarm was destroying planets, the Council observers congratulated themselves on successfully helping another species escape from their dangerous homeworld. They never suspected that they had just unleashed humanity's first interstellar war fleet, crewed by soldiers who viewed the destruction of entire enemy forces as just another day's work. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened a species that had been forged in the fires of a death world. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching his fleet prepare for another humiliating retreat. The massive screens around him showed the approaching Void Swarm, dozens of black ships, moving like hungry sharks through the darkness of space. For months, this had been the same terrible routine. The swarm would arrive, the Council forces would try to fight, and then they would have to run away before being completely destroyed. All ships, prepare for emergency evacuation, he ordered with a heavy heart. We cannot hold this system. But then something unexpected appeared on his sensors. A group of ships was approaching from the opposite direction, the human refugee fleet that was supposed to be heading to safety in Council space. Sir, his tactical officer called out, the Earth vessels are changing course. They're moving directly toward the Void Swarm. Vextar couldn't believe what he was seeing. These were supposed to be civilian evacuation ships filled with families and scientists. What were they doing heading straight into the most dangerous battle zone in the galaxy? Open a communication channel, he ordered quickly. Order them to stay back. They don't understand what they're flying into. But Captain O'Minjin, commanding the ship called Soul's Fury, had no intention of staying back. He sat in his captain's chair, calmly watching the enormous Void Swarm vessel growing larger on his main screen. The alien ship was 3 times the size of his own vessel, covered in weapons that could tear apart planets, and protected by shields that had never been penetrated by Council technology. Sir, we're receiving orders from the Council fleet to maintain distance, his communications officer reported. Tell them we appreciate their concern. Oh, Minjin replied with a slight smile. All crew, prepare for impact. Target the largest enemy ship on the Council command ship. Admiral Vextar watched in horror as the human vessel accelerated directly toward the massive swarm ship. Bright beams of deadly energy shot out from the alien vessel, weapons powerful enough to vaporize entire mountains. But somehow, the human ship kept flying through the attack, its hull glowing red-hot from the impacts, but not breaking apart. How is their ship still intact? His tactical officer whispered. What they didn't know was that O'Minjin's ship had been built by people who understood that sometimes the only way to survive was to accept damage that would terrify others. The hull had been reinforced with materials designed to withstand the crushing pressure of Earth's deepest oceans and the burning heat of volcanic eruptions. Impact in 10 seconds. Oh, Minjin announced calmly to his crew. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their ship from the outside. We're going inside to destroy it from within. The collision was spectacular. The Soul's Fury slammed into the Void Swarm vessel at full speed, its reinforced nose cutting through the alien armor like a knife through paper. The two ships locked together in a twisted embrace of metal and energy. Before the alien crew could react, small pods shot out from the human ship like bullets. These boarding pods, carrying Earth's most elite soldiers, crashed through the hull of the swarm vessel and began releasing their deadly cargo. Admiral Vextar watched his screens in amazement as the massive enemy ship suddenly went dark. All its weapons stopped firing, its engines shut down, and its communication systems went silent. What just happened? He asked in disbelief. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships were doing things that violated every rule of civilized space combat. Instead of fighting from a safe distance like proper military vessels, they were ramming enemy ships, flying so close that their weapons could touch the enemy hulls, and sending soldiers directly into hostile vessels. Captain Lee Soo-yoon's ship, the Ancient Thunder, flew directly under a swarm vessel and opened fire at point-blank range, her weapons literally melting through the enemy's hull from less than 100 meters away. When her main guns were damaged by return fire, she ordered her crew to launch their backup weapons, which turned out to be nuclear missiles fired from such close range that her own ship was caught in the explosion. But instead of being destroyed, the human ship emerged from the blast with its crew still fighting, while the swarm vessel broke apart into burning pieces. "These people are insane," Admiral Vextar's tactical officer muttered, watching another human ship survive what should have been a fatal collision with an enemy vessel. What he didn't understand was that these weren't insane tactics. They were the tactics of people who had learned to survive by accepting risks that would paralyze others with fear. To the human crews, fighting in space was just like fighting the storms, earthquakes, and dangerous wildlife of their home planet. When the battle was over, the Void Swarm fleet was completely destroyed. The humans had lost several ships and many brave crew members, but they had achieved something the Council forces thought was impossible. They had won a decisive victory against an enemy that had been unstoppable for years. For the first time in decades, a Council fleet held the battlefield instead of retreating. Admiral Choi Sun-woo sat in her office, surrounded by stacks of intelligence reports that grew taller every day. Each report contained details of another human victory against the Void Swarm, and at first, she had been thrilled. Finally, someone was winning battles against the enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for years. But as she read more reports, her excitement turned to worry, and then to something close to fear. She walked into the emergency council meeting carrying a thick folder of documents. The room was packed with military leaders and government officials from dozens of different worlds, all eager to hear about humanity's success against their common enemy. "Fellow council members," she began, "we need to discuss what our human allies are actually doing out there." She activated the holographic display, showing a map of known space with red dots marking recent battle locations. In the past month, human ships have been detected in 17 different star systems. They're not just responding to Void Swarm attacks, they're actively seeking them out and destroying them. Hinted Alexmira, whose blue skin had gone pale, with concern, leaned forward. "Isn't that what we wanted? For someone to take the fight to the enemy?" "That's what I thought too," Admiral Choi Sun-woo replied. "But look at how they're fighting." The holographic display changed to show recordings from various battles. Instead of the quick, efficient engagements everyone expected, the footage showed something much more disturbing. Human ships would completely surround defeated Void Swarm vessels, then spend hours systematically destroying every single piece, no matter how small. Intelligence Chief Mordok stood up, his voice shaking slightly. "They've developed new techniques that we never taught them. They're broadcasting the final communication signals from dying swarm ships, essentially playing recordings of their death screams to intimidate other swarm forces." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. "They've also created weapons specifically designed to target the swarm's ability to repair their ships," Mordok continued. "Instead of simply destroying the enemy quickly, these weapons cause the swarm vessels to break apart slowly, piece by piece, while the crew is still alive inside." Admiral Vexter, who had witnessed the first human victory, spoke up nervously. "I thought they were just being thorough in their destruction of enemy forces." "Thorough doesn't begin to describe it," Admiral Choi Sun-woo said, pulling up footage from the Vega system. "Watch this engagement." The human fleet defeated the swarm forces in less than an hour. But then they spent the next 8 hours hunting down every piece of debris larger than a person's hand. They used mining equipment to break apart the wreckage. then used industrial furnaces to melt down the pieces. The footage showed human ships methodically destroying escape pods, communication equipment, and even fragments of hull plating that had been blown off during the battle. They left nothing that could possibly be recovered or studied by other swarm forces. Why would they do that? Asked Councilmember Xenina. Because they understand something we didn't. Admiral Choi Sun-woo answered grimly. They're not just trying to win individual battles. They're trying to make sure the Void Swarm can never learn from their defeats, never adapt their technology, and never rebuild their forces. She paused and looked around the room at the worried faces of the other council members. On Earth, when a dangerous predator threatens their communities, humans don't just drive it away. They hunt down every member of the species in the area and eliminate them completely. It's not cruelty, it's survival strategy. They make sure the threat can never return. Intelligence Chief Mordok pulled up more reports. They've started sending small teams to systems where swarm forces were defeated months ago. These teams spend weeks searching through asteroid fields and debris zones, looking for any technology or remains that might have been missed. When they find something, they destroy it completely. General Kadovan, who had initially been skeptical of human capabilities, now looked genuinely frightened. They're treating this like extinction warfare. Because that's exactly what it is, Admiral Choi Sun-woo confirmed. To humans, the Void Swarm isn't just an enemy to be defeated. It's a species that needs to be completely eliminated to ensure their own survival. They're applying the same logic they used to survive on their dangerous homeworld. The room erupted in worried conversations as council members began to understand what they had unleashed. They had wanted someone to stop the Void Swarm, but they hadn't considered what it would mean to give that job to a species that viewed complete extinction of threats as a normal survival tactic. What have we done? Someone whispered from the back of the room. The question hung in the air like a dark cloud, because everyone was beginning to realize the same terrifying truth they had asked the most dangerous predators in the galaxy to solve their problem. And now, those predators were loose in space with the most advanced weapons ever created. Fleet Admiral Yoon Jun stood on the bridge of her flagship, staring at the sensor readings that showed the largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin. The display screen was covered in red dots, more than 3,000 Void Swarm ships moving toward Council space in a massive formation that stretched across multiple star systems. They're bringing everything they have, she said calmly to her staff officers. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. This is their final attempt to wipe out all intelligent life in the galaxy. Captain Bae Sumin, who was coordinating the human fleet's positions, looked up from her tactical display. It's actually smart strategy. They've realized that if they don't stop us now, we'll eventually hunt down and destroy every single one of them. Around the command center, human officers worked quietly at their stations, preparing for the battle that would determine whether their species and every other species in the galaxy would survive or be completely destroyed. But unlike the panicked emergency meetings happening on Council worlds, the humans seemed almost relaxed. All Earth vessels report ready for combat, Captain Bae Sumin announced. The Council fleets are staying back at a safe distance, just like we asked them to. Yoon Ji-yoon nodded with satisfaction. Perfect. Today, we're going to show the galaxy why growing up on a death world makes us different from everyone else. What happened next would change how every species in the galaxy thought about warfare forever. Instead of flying toward the enemy fleet like normal ships would do, the human vessels spread out across the entire battle zone and began doing things that seemed impossible. Some ships flew directly into asteroid fields and began attaching strange devices to the floating rocks. Others launched what looked like computer viruses into space, sending signals toward the approaching swarm fleet. What are they doing? Admiral Vextar asked from his council ship, watching the human fleet's strange behavior through his sensors. His question was answered when the first asteroid, now equipped with human technology, suddenly accelerated to incredible speeds and slammed into a group of swarm ships with the force of a nuclear explosion. Then another asteroid did the same thing, and another. The humans had turned the entire asteroid field into a giant weapon system, but that was just the beginning. The computer viruses they had launched began infecting the swarm ships' communication networks, causing the enemy vessels to become confused and start attacking each other. Swarm ships that had worked together perfectly for years suddenly couldn't coordinate their movements or share information. "Sir," Communications Officer Park Ji-won reported, "we're receiving urgent messages from Council Command. They're asking us to stop using these weapons. They say they're too dangerous and destructive." Yoon Jun's smile turned cold and determined. "Tell Council Command that we appreciate their concern, but we're just getting started." The human fleet then revealed weapons that even their own allies had never seen before. Ships began launching devices that created zones of space where nothing could survive, areas where the laws of physics themselves seemed to change, crushing enemy vessels or tearing them apart at the molecular level. Other human ships deployed what they called scorched earth protocols, weapons designed not just to destroy the enemy, but to make sure that nothing could ever live or grow in that area of space again. They were turning entire regions of the galaxy into dead zones that would remain lifeless for thousands of years. "How do they have technology like this?" asked a council observer, watching in horror as human weapons systematically eliminated groups of swarm ships that had seemed invincible just hours before. The answer was simple, but terrifying. Humans had developed these weapons by imagining the worst possible scenarios and then figuring out how to survive them. Living on a planet that constantly tried to kill them had taught them to plan for threats that other species couldn't even imagine. As the battle continued, it became clear that this wasn't just a military engagement, it was an extinction event. The humans weren't trying to defeat the Void Swarm. They were trying to make sure that every single trace of the enemy species was completely eliminated from the universe. By the time the fighting ended, the space where the massive swarm fleet had been was completely empty. Not just empty of ships, but empty of debris, energy signatures, or any evidence that anything had ever existed there. The Void Swarm, which had terrorized the galaxy for years and seemed unstoppable, was now completely extinct. Every ship destroyed, every piece of technology eliminated, every trace of their existence erased from reality. The galaxy was safe. But as council leaders looked at the weapon readouts and battle reports, they realized they now faced a new question. What do you do when the species that saved you is more dangerous than the enemy they destroyed? President Kim Mingi walked into the Grand Council chamber wearing a simple black suit, carrying a single folder containing humanity's final report. The enormous room was packed with representatives from hundreds of different worlds, all waiting to hear about the end of the war that had terrorized the galaxy for years. She moved to the center podium with calm, confident steps, showing no signs of the exhaustion that marked every other face in the room. While alien delegates looked tired and worried, she appeared completely relaxed, as if she had just finished handling a routine administrative task. Honored council members, she began in a clear, steady voice, "I'm here to report that the Void Swarm threat has been completely eliminated." The chamber fell silent. After years of desperate battles and constant fear, those simple words seemed almost impossible to believe. "All enemy vessels have been destroyed," she continued, opening her folder and reading from a prepared statement. "We've analyzed their technology and developed countermeasures to prevent similar threats in the future. The Void Swarm will not return because they no longer exist." Her tone was matter-of-fact, like someone reporting the weather or announcing lunch schedules. There was no celebration, no dramatic speeches about victory, just a simple statement that an entire species had been wiped from existence. Finally, Council Prime Zex Thora, a tall alien with silver skin and 4 eyes, stood up slowly. His voice was shaking slightly as he spoke. President Kim, the methods your people used during this conflict. They violate 17 different galactic agreements about how wars should be fought. The complete destruction of entire enemy fleets, the elimination of survivors, the weapons that make space itself uninhabitable. These actions go against everything we consider civilized. Kim Min-ji looked directly at him with calm, steady eyes. Your agreements were written by people who assumed their enemies could be reasoned with, negotiated with, or convinced to surrender. The Void Swarm consumed entire civilizations for food. They had no interest in peace talks or prisoner exchanges. We responded to them in the only language they understood. She paused and looked around the room at the hundreds of alien faces staring at her. When a dangerous predator threatens your family, you don't try to have a conversation with it. You eliminate it completely to make sure it can never hurt anyone again. Admiral Lee Suman, who had been standing quietly behind the president, stepped forward, carrying additional reports. Earth's fleet is now returning to our home system. We want to thank the Council for giving us the opportunity to help protect the galaxy. As the human delegation prepared to leave, a strange feeling settled over the assembled representatives. The galaxy's greatest threat was gone, destroyed so completely that no trace remained. But looking at these calm, efficient humans, many delegates were beginning to realize they might have simply traded one dangerous enemy for another. What do we do now? Someone whispered from the back of the chamber. The question hung in the air, because everyone was thinking the same thing. These humans had just demonstrated that they could eliminate any threat with cold, ruthless efficiency. They had weapons that could turn entire regions of space into dead zones. They had tactics that could destroy enemies who had seemed invincible. And they treated the complete extinction of hostile species as just another job to be completed. Council. Prime Zexthora watched President Kim Min-ji and her team walk calmly out of the chamber. Earth had saved every living species in the galaxy from certain destruction. But in doing so, they had revealed themselves as the most dangerous predators the universe had ever seen. These weren't grateful allies who would return to their peaceful farms and cities. These were apex hunters who had been forged by the most hostile environment in known space. People who viewed total warfare as natural and necessary. The age of humanity had begun, and there was no going back to the way things used to be. Meanwhile, deep in space, Admiral Park Se-jun stood on the bridge of his flagship as the human fleet made its way back toward Earth. Behind them, empty regions of space marked where entire enemy fleets had once existed. Ahead lay a galaxy full of species who now understood exactly what humans were capable of when threatened. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving messages from several council worlds. They're asking about establishing formal, diplomatic relations. Admiral Park Se-jun smiled slightly. Tell them we're always happy to talk with our neighbors, as long as they remain neighbors and not threats. The Void Swarm had sent out a distress signal that brought them into contact with the galaxy. What started as a cry for help had become something much more significant, the announcement that Earth's children were now among the stars, and they would never again allow anyone to threaten the species they had chosen to protect. Salvation had come to the galaxy, but it wore the face of complete and total annihilation for those who stood in its way.